Keith Jarrett was an American jazz pianist of uncertain race. He is mostly of European lineage, but he definitely has been described as looking like he's black, but none of this is actually particularly important. And the reason why I say he was a pianist is because he no longer thinks of himself as being a pianist. So after high school and a stint at Boston College, learning to play and playing in bars or whatever, I'm not quite sure. Sorry. He moved in 1964 to New York, and on the back of being seen playing, got hired by Art Blakey for the Jazz Messengers, who were a very high-profile jazz band. He started, after a while, leading some of his own stuff, so being a band leader in his own right. He was asked to join the Miles Davis group in, I believe, 1968 or somewhere thereabouts. And he was on some of the important albums for Miles Davis during that period. But he left in 1971. He has then since worked with quartets, worked solo, worked with a group called the Standards Trio, and has done some classical music as well, which he's composed and played himself. He became vocally opposed to electric instruments, though he had played some electric instruments in the past. Kind of in the later years, he was definitely kind of opposed to electric pianos and presumably electric guitars, etc. And he had his piano modified because he was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, which is something I suffer with myself. In 2018, he had 2 strokes and became paralyzed on his left side. He has got some use back from his left side through therapy, but he can now only play right-handed, and this is why I say he considers himself now not to be a pianist anymore. He has a typically large discography for a jazz musician. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is an album by a quartet that was led by Keith Jarrett, and Acclaimed Music credits this as being Keith Jarrett and Jan Garbarek. So Jan Garbarek was part of the quartet, but in all the other reading that I've come across, it's never credited as those two. It's been credited as a Keith Jarrett album or as an album of the quartet. And the quartet was variously called the European Quartet or the Belonging Quartet, named after this album, because this was the first album that was released by this quartet. So the quartet were Keith Jarrett on piano, Jan Garbarek, who's also mentioned in that title, on saxophones, Palle Danielson on bass, and Jon Christiansen on drums. And it's generally seems to be described as jazz, but Acclaimed Music describes it as ECM-style jazz. Now, I had to go and look that up. Not really sure 100% still what it means, but apparently it was a reaction to free jazz and is more kind of crossover. And I think that is a fairly good description of what this is, because it has elements of jazz, but it certainly doesn't have a kind of full-on jazz all about people doing improvisation stuff and not kind of the same feels as jazz all the time. So some of it has jazz feel. The drumming particularly, I would say, feels jazz. Sax music makes it sound a bit kind of like, I want to use the term here, lounge jazz kind of stuff. And the piano has got, again, some kind of jazzy elements, but it's breaking out into stuff that you could kind of imagine is almost pop sounding, almost easy listening. You could call it kind of jazz pop fusion, maybe. It kind of feels a bit at times like it could be stuff that would be in film songs or musicals even. It's a bit of a cross. And I'm even going to kind of throw in the idea that a bit of it is a bit, well, it's got some kind of complex rhythms and structures at times that makes it feel a little prog. So it's a bit of lots of different things put together. And sometimes when you do that, it's a bit of a mess. But in this case, it isn't. I think it really works. The sax takes the lead, definitely for tunes, and this is kind of immediately brings it out of a lot of jazz, certainly of the kind of later eras, is that it has definite tunes that you can hear, and not just tune at the beginning and tune at the end, bookending a load of improvisation in the middle. There's kind of definite different sections going through. It's more structured than a lot of jazz is. So as I said, the sax takes the lead, but they all have, in terms of tune, but they all have strong roles to play. There's obviously a focus on piano at times, but there is, decent roles for the bassist and the drummer. The bassist is, of course, an acoustic bassist. And I would say it's very musically accessible. I found it really easy to listen to. That doesn't mean that I feel like it is completely easy listening, because it's not as bland as that. It's got quite a lot going on, a reasonable amount of interest to it musically. It is entirely instrumental, of course. And it's nicely played. There's different feels across different tracks. There's one that has a kind of bluesy feel to it. And there's others that, they're very different. Some are very gentle and almost classical in feel as well. But it ties together by being the same quartet and using the same instrument sounds across. And it is kind of, in some ways, a demonstration of how you can have four instruments and they use the same sounds. They don't vary that, but then they do very different feels in the different tracks. It's really good for background music. You could certainly play this in a nice kind of bistro restaurant or something like that. I found it to be very pleasant and very listenable. So I want to know what you think. So please do talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.